Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I got to talk to a great leadership, and team effectiveness expert, Glenn Parker, joined me today. And Glenn's backstory is absolutely amazing. But Glenn really focused in on a couple of things, and that is how do leaders have positive influence today? What exactly is that, and how do you do that? And Glenn also really went into great detail on how you can lead through a crisis. So important. There's so many crises happening in the world today that can impact us in the business world. And Glenn really talked about navigating through that and gave some great advice for leaders. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I can't wait to get to our guest today. We're going to have a little bit of an expanded interview because he's got so much to offer, so much to share. For all you leaders out there, start to take some notes. We have got such a great show upcoming for you right now. I want to get right to him. Leadership and team effectiveness expert Glenn Parker has joined me today. Glenn, it is so great to meet you. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. Looking forward to the conversation, really.
Awesome. And now I should also say Glenn is an author. He's got some tremendous books out that he's going to talk about, and you've got to pick up your copy. I'm going to pick up mine. We're going to get to all that. But first, Glenn, I want you to start with your backstory and how you've really come to be an expert on building teams and team effectiveness, and now really talking about leading through positive influence and talking about leading through crises. What are some things that led to that? Tell us about your career and backstory.
Well, the backstory, I grew up in New York City, street kid, playing in the streets, stickball, punch ball, all the kind of street games that if you grew up in that city, you remember, because there wasn't a lot of grass, so we weren't playing tackle football, or there wasn't any little league, so we were figuring out our own leagues and figuring out our own games. And on the other hand, I was really fortunate to live in this city. A couple of hardworking parents, so they were working most of the time. So I was on my own a lot, and but I was fortunate because the city has had some great schools, and I had the opportunity to go to a great high school and then a great public college in the city college, city university now, which I'm very, very proud of. And during the course of my youth, I did have a chance to go to summer camp, and so there was a lot of leadership opportunities that I had, and I didn't realize at the time, of course, I'm a kid. I don't realize, oh, this is leadership responsibilities. I was the captain of the team, the captain of there's a kind of an Olympics at the end of a summer, and I was the kind of the captain of the Olympic team, where the entire camp gets divided into two teams. So I realized that this sort of kind of came naturally to me. I just didn't quite understand what exactly I was doing, but it seemed to work. And so I've had a chance to sort of reflect back on some of that. I did have an opportunity later on to go to graduate school and to learn about leadership and learn about leadership in different environments, particularly in team environments, and particularly in different types of organizations, both here and around the world. So I try to kind of put all that together. And over the years, the research that I've done has all been kind of field research, talking to people, and kind of gathering their stories, gathering their experiences, and then making something of that. And first of all, I love doing it. I love talking to people, and I love hearing their stories, and then taking from that, what can we learn from that it would be helpful to other organizations? Because my goal has always been to help other practitioners, what we fondly call action research rather than academic research. Okay, how do we learn from this? How do I write about this so that in such a way that people can actually use it to take action?
Right. Okay. That's so awesome. I love that, and a lot of great experience there. And by the way, I grew up in the city as well, in the Bronx, and so you had me at punch ball. Uh,
Bronx?
yes,
Oh
sir.
my God,
Yes,
brother.
sir. Yes,
My-
sir. Brother in arms there, right? Evander Childs High School.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So punch ball was a great
Yeah.
stoop ball. Absolutely was
Oh, absolutely.
awesome as well. Um, I loved everything that you just said, especially how you now really just love to help others. And amazing that recognized from a very early age, day camp or camp, that hey, if this guy's the leader, we're gonna put some things on his shoulders. Let's get into it because I really want to get your advice here today. So positive influence leaders. I want to start here, Glenn, though. Uh,
Okay.
Define the word influence for us. What's your definition of the word influence?
Well, influence is, particularly from a leadership standpoint, is trying to help people become their best self. What that's what I think a leader should do. A leader who is a positive influence on others, not to get them so much to do the work, but to be the best that they can be.
Yes,
That's how I look at it.
I think that's a great definition. You've worked with a lot of companies. What's been a struggle? Because I can remember it was a struggle to get my managers to be more influencers than managers, to get people to be their best, to just have that impact on them, to get them to do things because you influence them to do them, not tell them to do it.
Right.
What's been in your travels the number one struggle for leaders to be more influential?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it's just to it's personal for them to get off the my job is to tell you what to do and your job is
Yes.
to do it.
Right.
That's not the number one job. That the getting it done will happen when you focus on the employee, you focus on the members of your team, helping them to learn how to do the work well, being supportive of that effort, being also a role model to them. So you can't say one thing and do something else.
Yeah.
You've got to walk the talk. You've got to be that model in which they say, "Oh, okay, oh, that's how you do it." So that's the real challenge, is to get away from leading by power, from power, and more empowerment.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. You're 100% dead on. So positive influence leaders, you say that there's four types. Tell us about those.
Yeah, let me give you a little backstory, because
Yes,
you asked about myself,
yes,
and my kind of first experience with someone being a positive influence on me.
yes,
So I take you back a long time to my first job out of my first real job in the world. My first job out of graduate school, and take you back to my first performance appraisal meeting with my first boss, Larry. So we're in the meeting, and of course we're going over what I've done in the last year, and he seems to, he likes what I've been doing. And I have to just stop for a minute and tell you what I was doing. Basically, I was a researcher. I was hired because I was apparently good at research and writing reports, and that's what I did. He would give me an assignment, I'd research it, I'd write a report, he'd give me another assignment. Quite frankly, just between you and me, it was boring. So, and I had noticed across the hall, the folks across the hall in leadership training and development seemed to be having a lot of fun. They were traveling all over the place, conducting workshops, coming back with great stories. And I said, because I knew what was coming in the performance appraisal meeting, there's always your development plan that comes at the end, right? So I knew this was coming, so I was prepared. So when Larry asked me the question, I said, well, I think I might like to try leadership development, but I wondered if I could observe a class, like a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
So he said, well, Glenn, he said, as a matter of fact, next week I'm traveling down south to conduct a couple of workshops. They're 2-day workshops. And you can come with me. But there's just one thing. I really can't justify your travel expenses unless you teach something.
Right.
So, my lips start to quiver and I
Yeah.
go, what do you mean? Larry, I don't know anything. I can't, why am I going to teach something? What? So he said, don't worry, we'll figure it out. And he did. And it went well. But here's what happened. And it was a 2-day workshop. He gave me a 2-hour unit on the afternoon of the second day. So the group had already been sort of warmed up because he was really good at this. And I came in and did my thing, and it went well. And I went, oh, okay, now this is what I want to do. This is really, as they say, I found my true north. This is my purpose in life. This is what I found.
Yeah.
And the thing about Larry, and this is one of the kind of the crucial learnings, is that he didn't say to me, Glenn, I'm going down south next week. There's a 2-day workshop. And what I think you teach the workshop and I'll sit in the back of the room and I'll give you feedback. No, he didn't do that. He gave me a 2-hour window, something kind of tight. And he actually knew things that I did know. And so we figured out what the topic was and how to do it. And he also, this is what he positioned me for being successful. That was a success experience for me.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, I wouldn't have come away with this big high, and this is what I want to do. And the other thing about a positive influence leader is that they see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And that I did not realize that I really had this within me, that I could get up in front of a group of people and speak, and they would pay attention and they would walk away saying that they learned something.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience. Of course, I wasn't smart enough to realize that that Larry had done this. I just realized I was just thinking about myself at the time.
Yeah.
But I reflect back now and I say, wow, he was a game changer for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Even from the time that he put you on the second day, in the afternoon, how, instead of okay, you're going to kick things off in the morning, even just from those little things, you were so set up for success. I love that.
Yeah.
So go ahead and finish now. Let's talk about more positive. I love that. And I think we all need to have those people in our lives, especially, and that's a big missing piece in leadership today, I think. So what are the 4 types?
Okay, so just a little backstory. When we did the research, we were looking for a profile of what is a positive influence leader and what are the characteristics of that person. And as we interviewed people and they told us their stories, and we cataloged them and put them down and looked at it. We said, realize there's a lot of different ways that people can be a positive influence. They're related, they're similar, but they're different. And so we found it impossible to come up with a profile. It would have had such a laundry list of characteristics, it would have been totally useless. So we came up with these 4 buckets, these 4 types of positive influence leader. We call them styles. The one is a supportive leader, somebody who is supportive of you, that says, Glenn, you can do this. I got your back. I'm not going to do it for you, but I will be here to answer questions. I will put you in a position that is positive for you. So a person who's supportive and saying, okay, I know what you can do, just go and do it. The other is the teacher, because we often need to learn something. Someone who teaches us what we need to know in order to be successful. Not the whole curriculum, but what is it that we need to know in order to be successful at this? This is the teacher. The other thing we found that people told us about teachers is they teach you a set of values that really helps you through life, because we all come to these situations and crossroads, et cetera, and all the different metaphors. And you've got to say, okay, which way do I go? How do I do this? Do I do this? Do I go left? Do I go right? So they teach you a set of values along the way as well. And so, and then there's the motivating positive influence leader. And that's what Larry did. He was basically someone that sees something in you and brings it out, positions you to be successful. And then there's the role model. This is something that really surprised us, that a person can be a role model for other people, because people sometimes need, like my son is like this, he needed to see it. Billie Jean King said this years ago, when she met Althea Gibson. She said, she was so moved because she believes that, she said, if I can see it, I can be it. I love that expression. If I can see it, I can be it.
So, yes.
And so a role model is somebody who says, okay, that's how you become a leader. That's how you talk to people. And the key thing, as I said earlier, about the really effective role model is they walk the talk. Their actions are aligned with their words. I'm a big sports fan, so to many athletes, particularly basketball players, Michael Jordan is the role model. And the really smart people will look at him and not try to copy his jump shot, but they try to copy his work ethic. The first in the gym, the last to leave, won't leave until they can make 90 out of 100 foul shots. That's the really impactful role model, is somebody who you can look at and say, okay, that's how it is. And there are so many times also, most of us never get a chance to meet Michael Jordan, but he can still be a role model to you. Oprah Winfrey, the same way, is a role model to just a generation of people, particularly women. And they'll never meet her, but they see, oh, okay, I see how that's done. Now, many of us have role models that, you look at them at work and say, oh, okay, I see how he or she operates, and I can learn from that, and maybe I can be that.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And I think the analogies you just gave are spot on. So teacher, motivating, supportive, role model. Glenn, which one are you?
I I am my primary one is motivator. Yeah, I think that's what I do, and particularly as I've gotten older, I think that's my primary thing. But the key thing here, Ken, is that all of us have the capacity to be all four,
Mm,
and we do, and we are. We just happen to use one more than others. What we call your primary
mm-hmm,
style.
mm-hmm.
All of us do all of these things. I'm very often a teacher because I spent a good chunk of my working life doing corporate training and doing team building sessions where I'm teaching people how to do that.
Yeah.
And so what we do is try to figure out which is our style and how do we grow as a person, because ultimately what we want to be is a well-rounded positive influence leader, someone
Yeah.
who's able to use the strengths of all four styles and be, and this is really critical, situational. So I'm looking at Ken and I'm figuring out, okay, what does he need? And in particular, what does he need right now? And flex to that need
Mm,
rather than
mm,
just go with my, you know, go with my A game
mhm.
to my interactions with him. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And you answered what was going to be my next question. I'm going to ask it anyway, which is how can leaders be a little bit more intentional when it comes to figuring out, number one, what their styles are, and then figuring out and being flexible that maybe that style is not really hitting the mark with
Yeah.
my people that are in my influence. How can leaders be more intentional and just more aware of all of the
Yeah.
styles and how to
All
use them?
right. So there's a lot in that question. Let me just sort of unpack that a little bit. Um, so we realized that people are going to have that question, and it's a very good question. So in the back of the book, the red book back there, the positive influence, the leader who helps people become their best self, there's a self-assessment instrument that you fill out and you get a reading on your four types as to which is your primary and so on. Now, we don't leave it there. We say, okay, that's who you are right now. Where do you want to go? So there's also an opportunity for say, okay, let me create a development plan that focuses on I can be perhaps more of this and less of that in order to get to a place where I'm more effective, well-rounded, and this is a little bit of a pretentious word, more of a transformational leader who's able to be, as Ken Blanchard used to say, a situational leader who can look at a person or look at a situation and say what's needed right now and do it.
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
so, um, and the publisher has been good enough. I mean, you can in the back of the book fill it out yourself. Publisher's been good enough to separate out and publish the survey and this little development exercise in a separate booklet, so you can do it as a booklet. It's a lot more convenient and easier to do. And if you wanted to do it with your team, you can do it with your team where everybody fills it out and everybody gets their scores, and then they team up with another member of the team, particularly somebody who might know them well, and that person might augment their own personal reflections with their feedback on what they've observed during the course of working with them.
mm. I love that, and that really heightens the awareness if you're intentionally, figuring it out and answering the survey there honestly. That really now you're intentional and you're figuring out, okay, this is where I need to be. That's awesome.
Yes, right.
That's awesome. I,
Yeah.
I, I love it. Love it. Um, Let me ask you about the other side of that, Glenn, and negative influences. And it sounds like we both are from the Bronx originally. I can remember some negative influences in my life. Thank God I have my dad, who was just a
Yeah.
great positive influence, and my brothers. But Man, oh man, I could. It didn't take me long to look on any street corner and figure out some negative influences. Right? How do we
Yes.
tune those out?
Yeah. That's an interesting question because when we started out, we because we start with sit down, brainstorm a bunch of questions that we're going to ask all these people who we're interviewing, and we didn't have that in there. And second or third interview in, someone said to us, um, gee, aren't you going to ask me about negative influences? Because I've got a lot more of those to tell you about than I do. And we said, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we should be doing that.
Yeah.
So we continued to do that. And we went back to some of the couple of the first interviews and asked people, what were who were some of the negative influences in your life and what did they do? And we discovered some different things that happened to people. Um, and also, we also said to them, how'd you cope with it? How'd you deal with it?
Yes.
And so, for example, um, David, who was someone that we interviewed, he told us a story about going. He was in high school, and he went to talk to the guidance counselor about college. Uh, I guess they call them career counselors now. So, and he said, he said, I want to go to college and I want to have a double major in engineering and business. And the counselor looked at him and went, really? And that's all he needed to hear because it was,
Yeah.
I don't think you can do it. That
Yeah.
that was the message that he got. And so, you know what he took away from that? I'm going to prove you wrong.
Mm.
I'm going to prove you wrong. And he did. He went on to go to engineering, get an engineering degree with a minor in business, went on to get hired right out of college by General Electric, had a 30-year career with GE and became an engineering manager, and now is a consultant to organizations. And I said to him, "Did you ever go back to your high school, like at a reunion, and say, guess what?"
Yeah.
He said, I didn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, by the way, I said, David, do you think that she said that to you because you were an African American young man? And he said, no, she was just bad at her job.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so one of the motivations for a number of people is to prove this other person wrong.
Yeah.
That's one of the coping strategies. Um, Another one is to do like a workaround. Um, a woman that we interviewed who was a senior HR person for an insurance company. She said that it, she was assigned to an IT group to be the HR liaison. And clearly, the IT manager did not like women in these kinds of roles or any kind of important professional roles. And so he treated her with disdain. There would be meetings. He wouldn't invite her. She wouldn't get on the invite list. You wouldn't get the email. But she was one of those things where, this was her assignment. She had to make do. She started to work individually with members of that IT group and provide information, be helpful to them. Gee, what do you want to know? You want to know about your benefits? You want to know about your pension contributions? I can get that for you. You want to change your health plan? I can facilitate that. I can be helpful to you. So she worked around and became helpful and useful and became accepted by the employees in the group because she brought something positive to them. She
Mm.
said the manager never accepted me. And my job, I didn't feel like I had to spend all of my time proving myself to him. I felt my job was to spend my time being useful as an HR liaison, that
Mm,
kind of thing, which was to kind of work around, because you can't always, sometimes some of the people that we talk to, their negative influence was one of their parents.
yes. Yeah.
And there are certain things you can't, uh it's very difficult at times. First of all, you can't fire your parents, you can't
Right.
fire your father, you can't, you may like a job and maybe you can't afford to quit the job.
Hmm.
um another coping strategy was to learn from it. um Jody, who was someone that we interviewed, she really wanted to get into women's health care, and so she got hired by a women's health center in South Florida, and she encountered this director of the center who was just a bad leader. She would foster conflict among the members. She didn't listen. She would say, "Oh, can I have your ideas? I want to get your input," and then not listen to it and not utilize it. Um, and so, what Jody did, because she really wanted to stay in this field of women's health,
Hmm.
she said she learned from it and said, okay, in her mind, she put back, when I get a chance to be a leader, I know what not to do.
Wow. Yeah.
Opposite
Yeah.
of that. And she runs a wonderful center in South Florida for women who've been sexually and physically abused. And she's a star because of that.
Hmm.
So there were different, just different coping strategies that people came up with, because in many cases, you can't just blow off somebody who's a negative influence.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
um, but yeah, people had a lot of, I mean, some of the stories people told, I mean,
Yeah.
I, how you survived with this. You
Yeah.
know, a good friend of mine, he was in the second grade, and they wanted, he was asked to draw um, uh, something. And so he's there drawing as carefully as he can, and he's racing and making sure it's exactly right. And he's put so much effort into it. And I know this man, he's a colleague of mine, that this is the kind of work he does. He's very precise about things. And the teacher comes around and looks at it and says, "You trace that." He said, "No, I didn't trace." "Yes, you did. You trace," because it was so perfect.
Look too
She
good. Yeah.
the fact that yeah, well, something, he never did any artwork for the rest of his school years. He was so devastated by that experience.
Yeah.
And this is a incredibly talented person. He's just a, I don't want to say world class, but he's a great photographer, and he
Hmm.
does all kinds of wonderful artistic things.
Yeah.
But almost didn't, because of just one negative influence.
Wow. Wow. Some great advice on how to cope. And what I take out is that you said second grade. People remember, man. And some of these things can affect you for your whole life. And
God,
you just hope that that they remember the Larrys of the world, the more positive experiences. But we can probably, all of us, remember when a teacher said something to us, or someone else in authority said something to us, and it stayed with us. And if we don't have those coping skills like you just talked about, they'll just fester in there for our whole lives, and we
sure.
won't get past it.
Yeah.
Um I got one more question on influence. It's been amazing. And then I really want to get your advice on leading in a crisis. um you talk a little bit about how famous people can be so influential now. Talk a little bit about that, and what is that? I was so happy I never really looked up to famous people. I loved Hank Aaron and Muhammad Ali and people like that when I was younger, but I had my dad right there, so I had a role model to look to. But boy, oh boy, we see famous people, especially with social media now, having more and more influence. Talk a little bit about that, Glenn.
Yeah, I think nowadays you sort of have to be very careful about who you who you pick as your role model, and not just go with the latest, shiny object. You want to pick somebody that's got some substance and is somehow doing something that's related to you,
Yes.
um, because and this is especially true if we have some responsibility for younger people. We have some responsibility for teenagers, for example, because they're so influenced now by social media. So it's helpful to help them pick someone who is um, a positive influence. Like my son and I um, have a very strong belief that people who are successful, and this is the phrase we use, put the work in.
Yeah.
They put the
Yeah.
work in
Yeah.
because he believes about himself and I believe about myself that that's how I've become successful. I put the work in. I prepare. Um, as he said to me, that and he's way far along in his career and he has leadership positions now. But he said, I always felt that I probably would never be the smartest person in the room, but there was no one in that room that was going to outwork me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was going to come in the best prepared person to that meeting. And that's what you can do. And those are the kind of people that you want to follow, whether I just was watching a documentary um, primarily on Jason Kelsey. Now his brother has become more famous because,
Travis. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Travis.
Yeah.
But Jason, they're both going to the Hall of Fame, and Jason happens to be a center, so he's more of a grunt in football.
Yeah.
But people who know the game watch, and he puts the work in, as did his brother, um, and he's always doing that. Um, and so when people look for a role model, that's the kind of person who is not looking for adulation all the time, looking for some affirmation, some recognition, uh, but realize that the only way to really get there is to put the work in, as I say again, is the only way I can say it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's and you don't have to search that far. You can find people that talk about the work or have things where you can see behind the scenes, such as that documentary you're talking about with the Kelseys, and you just see the work behind the scenes. Or if you ever see a player that's gotten injured and they're away from the crowds and everything, but they're putting that work in to rehabilitate their knee and stuff like that. Those are the folks that you can follow. You're absolutely right. Um,
Yeah.
I I'd love to jump over and influence. That was great how you broke that down. I really want to jump over to leading in a crisis, and because this is a good foundation that you've talked about and given so much great advice. What's some of the biggest challenges for leaders when the team or
Yeah.
wherever is going through a crisis? And I know you've got some good stories around that. So talk to us a
Yeah.
little bit about those challenges.
Yeah. Again, the same thing. We asked what were the major challenges, and we just let the data, let the interviews, the responses tell us. And we found like kind of six major areas that were big challenges, from the emotional toll on all of these leaders, um, down to the high degree of difficulty of clear and consistent messaging. How do you communicate in a clear and consistent way during a crisis? The need to care about the health and the welfare and the safety of your employees and your customers, but primarily your employees. Um, and of course the loss of business. I mean, businesses just lost, they just dropped like crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so, but the emotional toll on people was the thing that just stood out to us. And I want to share with you some of the things that people said and told us. For
Sure.
example, Mitch Rudin, who was is the CEO of a Seville's, a major commercial real estate company based in New York City. He
Mm-hmm.
said to us, "My biggest concern was dealing with the mental health of our people while trying to maintain our positive, upbeat culture." Many leaders at that time had to not only be concerned about their employees, but they had to be concerned about the impact on themselves because they were feeling a lot of this also. A lot of them initially took the point of view, well, I have to be strong for everybody. They're going to be looking to me, and I have to be, you know, I have to be strong. I have to be that powerful
Yeah.
leader. After a while, they realized that they didn't need to be that way. In many ways, to humanize their leadership, they could say, look, I have a family too, and I'm worried about them getting COVID. My aging mother lives with us, and I'm concerned about bringing the virus home to my family, and particularly to my mother. Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Um, so at the same time, remote work became a thing. So this toll of the stress and the emotionality was greatly increased by remote work because why the day never ended. And
Yeah.
by the way, you couldn't hide. Everybody knew where you were. You were home. We could get you at any time. And that meant the
Yeah.
day really was long. Now, people will say, and it's true, I didn't have that crazy commute. I didn't commute for 3 hours a day, into the city or and into the office. But still, that was the case. It was a long, long day. And then when finally the workday ended, that didn't end the day. The day continued and the stress continued because what else was going on? The school age kids were home and they needed help because suddenly they're learning remotely and suddenly you're having to help them with homework and you're going, this math doesn't look like any math that I learned.
Yes.
And yet you got to be there helping them. And quite frankly, a big um, the big impact of that remote work fell on the women of the country because they tended to be the ones still responsible for the household, for the children, and for their education and the like. So there was a great toll and great stress on them as well. And so um, that was a big part of it. Layered on top of all of this was the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the hundreds of thousands of people that were protesting in the streets as a result of that. And that you say, oh, that was just a news story. No, it impacted organizations because many of those employees in the street were employees of the organization, of
Yeah.
your organization. And
Yeah.
they're saying, what are we doing about this?
Yeah.
Where's our role in this? And we people told us about what happened and what their role was. I'll give you a couple of examples. Eric Nordstrom, who was the CEO of Nordstrom's department store, it's a clothing store, as you know. He got on a plane and flew to Florida almost immediately when he heard that one of the Nordstrom employees was, I'll use the word, harassed by the police. And he went to Florida. He met with the police. He met with the employee. He met with the other employees and kind of settled the issue because he felt that that was something that, as the CEO and as an organization and as a leader, that you wanted to be a positive influence by doing the right thing at that time.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were gonna
Yeah.
gonna
No. Wow. I'm
to that.
amazed. That's amazing. It's amazing that he did that.
Yeah. The Hans Vestberg, who's the CEO of Verizon. He was very impacted by this, and he had an all hands meeting with Verizon employees on a Zoom, and he starts talking about this, and he said, this, talking about those murders, he said, this is not acceptable in America. And he started to cry. And I've seen the video of it. I'm sure it's on YouTube. And I'm stunned as the CEO and crying in front of employees. Jody McLean, who's the CEO of another real estate company, they run a bunch of shopping centers. What she did is that she got a copy of Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. She sent it out to all of the locations, and she set up small group discussions with 10 people and a facilitator, and people just could talk about whatever they were feeling, because she felt, and I think I happen to agree, that rather than bottling this stuff up and relying on social media, relying on crazy talk shows on television, she was going to do something positive that was within their purview. They felt, people started to feel that our responsibility to employees does not end at the end of the workday or end of the or at the office door or the plant gate. It's the full person, and we're responsible for that. And when leaders take that as their responsibility, as being a positive influence on the total person, then they're really doing something. They're really doing something positive. So that, I mean, I could go on. I've got more stories, but there were a lot of challenges. I can talk about one that I think particularly hits me, and I think would hit you too.
Sure. Yes.
The work that you're in was the need for clear and consistent communication. It was extremely difficult to get a clear message out because you were getting conflicting messages.
Yes.
Really, depending on the industry that you were involved in. And so, and there's certain leaders, there's certain ones of us who feel like, well, I can't send out a message until I get complete information. I know everything about the topic. And that didn't work. For example, this is what one of the folks we interviewed said, Rob Zimmerman. He works with a company called NAES. They operate power plants, and obviously they were greatly impacted by the virus. He said, you can't be paralyzed by the fear of giving the wrong answer. We had to get comfortable with, this is what we know today, but stay tuned because things may change tomorrow. And if they do, you'll be the first to know. And that's a learning. That's a new thing for people.
Oh, yes.
That. So getting clear communication. Let's say you're in, which I know a lot of your listeners are in hospitality. They're in hotel. They're in restaurant management. So you're getting all kinds of conflicting. You've got the World Health Organization, you got the CDC, you got the state health department, you have the county health department, you have the city or the township health department giving you all kinds of messages. And then you've got your industry. You've got the National Restaurant Association, you got the American Hotel Association that are coming out with their own guidance and guidelines on you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you clean with this, you don't, all these kinds of things. And making sense of all of those things became a real challenge for people. And then, how do you interpret that for your employees? One of the fellows we interviewed, who's the general manager of a Marriott, said, I had to take a CDC guidance and translate it into language that was easy for everyday people to understand. Because it was all this arcane medical terminology. So, you're getting the flavor of the thing.
Absolutely. It is it's so important though. Well, let me ask you, how important is it that leaders are visible during
Yeah.
crisis, that you're there, you're present?
It's a great question because that's what the really good ones understood and did,
Hmm.
that they had to be present. That wasn't so easy. So, for example, the hospital CEOs, they were walking the floors of the hospital, talking to employees and saying, "How are you doing? What can I do to help? What
Yes.
do you need? Oh, you need ventilators? They're back ordered. I'm sorry, we got supplied. I got to be truthful with you. But as soon as they come in, you're going to get them. Do you need some time off? Yeah, you need to talk to somebody because we've got the staff psychologist available. We have the religious leaders that are on staff at the hospital prepared to talk to people to offer counseling. Um, so they were doing that. In some businesses, for example, we interviewed the CEO, Mike Axiotis, who's the CEO of a company that owns 21 Red Robin restaurants.
Okay.
He said, what floor am I going to walk? I got 21 locations.
Yeah.
So he would pick up the phone and just say, Ken, how you doing?
Mm.
Uh, and he's the kind of leader that knows the people in his organization. So he would say, "I know the kids are probably home. How is that working out? What can I do to help? What do you need? How are you managing? I know you were able to open for a while the restaurant, and it was difficult to getting some staff. So he would make these kinds of calls in order to be present.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what everybody talks about,
Yes.
being authentic and being present. But it wasn't so easy for a lot of these people to
Yes.
to do that sort of thing. So
Yes.
what they did, what they could. We talked to the chief administrative office, the number two in Amtrak. He was walking the platforms of the stations. He rode the trains.
Mm.
Um, and same thing. What do you need? How can I help?
Yeah.
At the same time, what was happening besides the being present was there was a lot more empowerment. For example, on the trains, we didn't hear a lot about this, but it was really interesting with the way when I interviewed him. We heard a lot about airplanes and the abusive behavior of passengers against airline personnel, particularly the flight
Yes.
attendant, physical abuse as well as verbal abuse. But it happened on trains too.
Mm.
And they said to the onboard employees, they said, do what you need to do. What we don't want you to confront or get into an altercation with any passenger. If a passenger does not want to wear a mask, okay. You can say to the other passengers in the car, if you would like to move to another seat, you may. If you'd like to move to another car, you may.
Hmm.
That's the way you handle it. But on the spot, the employee was empowered to handle that situation. And that's a lot of what went on in during this time. There was a lot more empowerment, and as a lot of them said to me, was more, we got used to less power and more empowerment because
Yeah.
we were saying to employees, you got to kind of figure it out because
Yeah.
you're there and you kind of know what's best for our passengers, our customers, our patients. um, and that was a good thing.
Yeah.
That was a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
you know what they came away saying? We got some pretty smart employees.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
got some very smart employees,
Yeah.
and we what we just need to do is unleash them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. And I think that leaders that followed a lot of the things that you just said, Glenn, grew a lot
Yes.
over that period of time. And I think their companies, their trust of the employees that had for their leaders grew. On the flip side, for leaders that did hide or said, I got to wait for corporate to get an answer for this, I think suffered, during that time
That's
and,
yeah.
and had a tough time coming back. What amazing advice that you've given. I really, I've got to get just another quick piece of advice from you because your leadership and you have such great experience that I'll make sure I put in my notes all the companies you've worked with and helped and the thousands of people I'm sure that you've helped and now are reaching through your books. What's one or two, this is selfishly for my audience here, what's one or two do you see, Glenn, as must-have skills that leaders that are just coming up need to have here in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, I think I'll talk about the empowerment because I think that that's
Yes.
one of the things that people learned, and we were, talking about this. This was like the shiny new great new thing years and years ago, and it's making a comeback now where people realize that empowering employees and letting go of power um, is really critical. I can't help but mention a couple of other things. Not always feeling that you have to be the smartest person in the room. And as a wise person once said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And because you want to be
So
in a
true.
place where you can learn something.
So
Yeah,
true. Yeah.
and not always having to be the first person to answer the question or solve the problem that allow people in the organization. And I think the maybe the third thing that I'll end with is expressing a concern and a caring for employees because there was a lot of talk right after about the so-called great resignation. Employees were
Yeah.
leaving in droves and we can't find employees. Not all organizations experience that.
Right.
One that had communicated a sense of caring, that we care about you, as I said earlier, that our responsibility to you does not end at the plant gate or the front door. We care about the total employee, and those kinds of organizations and those leaders attract people who want to come and stay and work. I actually wrote an article about that that's I put up on LinkedIn, and I think it's on our website too, calling "Creating a Great Place to Work," and that's I compared two restaurants that are in my area. I did not name them, but
Yeah.
I compared two, and one that did it really well, and one that didn't. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of how I would leave it with.
Awesome.
I would do want to make an offer to your your audience
Yes.
about
Sure.
uh, a way of getting some copies of a copy of the one or both of the books.
Absolutely.
Um, so this is what I would say. If you write to me, and I'll give you the email address. If you write to me, give me your mailing address. I will send you a copy of either book, either Positive
Wow.
Influence, the leader who helps you become your best self, or Positive Influence, leadership in a time of crisis.
Yes.
I will send you a complimentary signed copy of the book if, and one of the things we didn't talk about is that positive influence leaders pay it forward. Ones who have benefited from a positive influence, like Larry did with me, I
Yeah.
consider most of my life, paying it forward. Like people are always coming to me and saying, help me write a book. How do you write a book? How do you get started? I help them all the time. So if you agree to buy a copy from Amazon and then gift it to a friend or colleague of yours, then that's the way it'll be. So you can email me at Glenn, Glenn, at thepositiveinfluenceleader.com. Glenn at thepositiveinfluenceleader.com with your mailing address. And I promise you'll never get on a mailing list. I don't do mailings anyway. Um, we'll send it to you. It'll be signed, and then we'll trust that you'll buy the book
Glory.
and give it to and pay it forward by gifting it to a friend or a colleague. So
I
that
love that. I love
Okay.
that. Awesome. Glenn, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you for being so generous with your time and all of the great advice that you passed on today. That is so helpful, not just in business, but in life. You talked about so many life applications that we can use as well. It's been an honor to be able to connect with you today, and I can't wait for folks to hear this.
Okay. Bronx brother. All right.
There you go. Yes, yes. So, folks, we're gonna leave it there.
Right.
And so this has been Kenny, and Glenn has been a Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.